If you are what you say you are, a superstar, then have no fear. Koala T is here to clock your T on teasing tension with the tiny Tupac twin King Kung Fu Kenny. Cause the samurai who said goodbye to the mainstream in 2013 still seems slighted by the highest hip-hop hero, possibly accomplishing Lupe's tallest dreams when Kendrick himself was still at ground zero. Lupe was poised to peak, but these days debates with Jason and Koala T control his emotions. See, control is where the poison leaked into the rivalry of hip-hop's highest thinkers. So let's dig deeper, blast your speakers, and like you're turning left, flip those like and sub buttons on like your car ride's blinkers.
If it ain't about the bread, it ain't concerning me. I'm like a journalist, I got a plutters down in Germany. They never heard of this, felt like a plane without the turbulence. You moving totalist, load up a beat and try to murder it.
I study rap
Aholics
for a living.
Now before we go any further, if you don't know, you need to know, Lupe Fiasco is one of the most talented writers in hip-hop history. And it's not just his music that proves it. Lupe's lyrical ability became so respected that it eventually carried him beyond music and into academia. He became an MLK visiting professor at MIT where he teaches rap theory and practice, an entire university course focused on the underlying structures, principles, writing methods, and creative practice of rap. And Lupe's talents were recognized almost right out the gate. He won a Grammy Award for one of the first singles he ever released, which is unfortunately a song that Lupe claims himself he does not receive any royalties or profits from. It was a track produced by the CEO of Atlantic, forced onto his album, and to this day, he claims he sadly does not get paid for it. His decade-long mistreatment from his own record label stretched so far to the point where the internet activist / hacker group Anonymous ended up pressuring Atlantic Records to release Lupe's fifth album, Tesso and Youth, and let him out of his record contract. And Lupe claims that because of this, the label may have released him out of the deal, but they reset the terms on his contract, delaying the ownership of his masters by 10 years, meaning it would take an extra decade for Lupe to end up getting paid off his own work based off an internet protest that fans of his had contrived independently, all because they were so frustrated with the way that the label was treating Lupe. Think about that. His fans fought the label for him, and because of that, the label ended up punishing Lupe even further.
Anonymous stopped fighting North Korea and the Ku Klux Klan and sent a letter to Atlantic and said, hey, if you don't release Lupe Fiasco's album, we're going to dox the entire label. I had nothing to do with that. The label blamed me because they said I did it. They said I called Anonymous and told them to do the thing. When Anonymous did the threaten to hack and they was like, we gave him a release date and dropped me from the label, one of the terms of getting off Atlantic was they reset the clock on all my masters. So normally you get your masters at 10 years. This is real talk. I never heard this. I was saving this for the memoirs, but I give it to you because y'all my family and the fans so they can know the real hard decisions that I had to make behind the scenes.
Now this isn't necessarily a Lupe sympathy video or a glazing video, but I'd like to try and paint the picture of how we got to this point. Why one of the most acclaimed and talented writers of this generation, who is now an MIT professor, teaching writing at one of the most prestigious universities in America, how did he end up arguing with content creators about defending his own perception of what makes a great lyricist? And in the crux of that, why is he in heated debates about Kendrick Lamar?
You said I'm having a one-sided relationship. Is that the same one-sided relationship that you had with Kendrick name in your mouth?
We're not talking about him. He's not here. He's a better artist than me. He makes better albums. He has a better team. He has better beat selection. He has better production. He has all of these better things. When it comes down to lyricism, when it comes down to these lyrics, no. Everything else, for sure. 100%. More personal, better narratives, more feeling, more personal. I don't want to share my feelings. I don't want to share my feelings with like you. Like, why would I share my personal stories with niggas who gonna talk crazy about you? I don't do that.
So the thing is, it's comments like this. It's the fact that Lupe has made it almost a yearly tradition to say something about Kendrick Lamar and his artistry that does not necessarily carry the most positive undertone. This has all led many fans to believe Lupe has some form of resentment towards Kendrick Lamar. And if that's the case, why would that be? You see, in my eyes, Lupe Fiasco's career is almost like if Kendrick's career took place in a parallel universe. They were both raised with a very strong father figure, surrounded by violence, but don't kill me for the corniness here, they were both almost raised like good kids in a mad city. Speaking on his childhood, Kendrick has said, when you see kids doing things that the world calls harmful or a threat, it's because they don't know how to deal with their emotions. When you have a father in your life, you do something and he'll look at you and say, what the F are you doing? Putting you in your place, making you feel this small. That was a privilege for me. Similarly, Lupe grew up surrounded by darkness and violence, but his family's guidance gave him the discipline and clarity to stay grounded and move towards a brighter path. Lupe had said, I grew up in the hood around PR prostitutes, drug dealers, killers, and gangbangers, but I also grew up juxtaposed. On the doorknob outside of our apartment, there was blood from some guy who got shot, but on the inside of the apartment, there was National Geographic magazines and encyclopedias and a little library bookshelf situation, and we didn't have cable, so we didn't have the luxury of being brainwashed by MTV. We watched public television, cooking shows, and stuff like that. And both their personal music tastes early on are kind of interesting as well. Lupe recalls gravitating towards artists like Scarface and 8Ball and MJG, while Kendrick spent his teenage years being infatuated by artists like Tupac and Lil Wayne.
I never told Wayne this. Me and J-Rock in the studio with Wayne. That changed my perspective about work ethic. And we took that same intensity in that work ethic and we applied it moving forward.
And both their motives for picking up a pen in the first place seem similar as well. Lupe initially turned to hip-hop as a creative outlet to counter the vulgarity and misogyny that he disliked about the genre, with a desire to positively influence the youth. Meanwhile, Kendrick started rapping primarily to process his emotions and make sense of the harsh realities of growing up in Compton, using music as a tool to tell the stories of his community. But why I say it's almost like they're the same rapper from parallel universes is because both of them were able to leverage the major record labels to ascend into superstardom and break boundaries for the standard of the level of consciousness that was acceptable and digestible in mainstream music. But while Lupe gained independence on a horrible note with his record label, Kendrick left the majors on a good note and started his own label, continuing to reach commercial heights that Lupe was never able to see. But it can't be emphasized enough how much both of these two artists were pillars in taking lyricism to a whole other stratosphere. Early on, Lupe's complex bars were actually the catalyst behind launching the website Rap Genius into becoming a household name.
They made Rap Genius because of you?
Yeah, it kind of just first started, it was bubbling to the point where the labels were paying attention. And I remember the kid who started it came up to Atlantic and we had a meeting. He was like, yo, you know, we started Rap Genius to break down your lyrics. And I was like, okay, can I have some money?
Meanwhile, the layered and cryptic Easter eggs that Kendrick left all throughout his battle with Drake, those were the catalysts that led to the creation of many YouTube rap lyric breakdown channels that you see today, my own channel included. But while Kendrick is out here ascending to higher levels by battling one of the other biggest artists in hip-hop, Lupe is out here battling those YouTube channels that very same Kendrick and Drake beef helped create. Instead of battling the biggest rappers in the game, he's battling the biggest YouTubers in rap media about the biggest rapper in the game.
Yesterday, social media was ablaze with the reaction to apparently Lupe Fiasco in a now deleted series of tweets claiming that he's a better lyricist than Kendrick Lamar, and also kind of going farther to explain himself, which in a way just ended up kind of making the drama worse.
5 years later.
What? How do you find it 50 other people?
I said it was hundreds and I'll name them.
100.
And we can list them, right?
Okay, but do you have to say?
We can start from Rosenberg Raw all the way to motherfucking Blue.
Okay, just to kind of make it clear, it is Lupe Fiasco's opinion that there are hundreds of rappers walking the planet today who don't even have a record deal and I guess are better than Kendrick Lamar.
Now you see, for years, every time Lupe Fiasco pops out, adding another staple to his yearly tradition of discrediting Kendrick Lamar's abilities, fans chalk it up or theorize that their issue started because of what Kendrick Lamar said on Control. And recently, Lupe even admitted that these issues derive from Control, but not because of what Kendrick said, but instead, what his fans said.
13 years later, there's 100 niggas better than a nigga. You know, can you see how...
What happened in between that? Control.
Yeah.
When that dropped, every nigga that wasn't Kendrick was terrible. The fan base, every fan base, everywhere, like, niggas is garbage. Every nigga was trash. Fans going crazy. And that's how you knew the song came out. It's like, yeah, I told you, nigga. You ain't shit. You ain't shit compared to, and y'all know how Kendrick fans get. They go crazy. It's in my control response. I'm not talking to him. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to your fans. To show you niggas is still nice.
Nessie, I can't speak for Lupe Fiasco, but my theory is that these issues may have started when Kendrick released Control, but it's not because of what he said. It's not because of what his fans said, but instead, it's about what Kendrick Lamar did not say. See, Kendrick Lamar did not mention Lupe Fiasco's name on that Control verse. Instead, he listed off every rapper in the game whose lunches and fan bases he wants to take. And it wasn't like it was just new school rappers. He mentioned Pusha T, who was releasing music on a major label a decade before Kendrick Lamar ever did. He name-dropped artists like Wale and Jay Electronica, who gained a mainstream buzz almost half a decade before Kendrick Lamar ever did. So by 2013, when that Control verse dropped, why was Lupe not in that conversation? Especially considering when just 2 years before Control released, Lupe Fiasco had a top 10 hit on the Billboard charts and an album that sold 200,000 copies in the first week. By the time Kendrick released Control, he didn't even have a Billboard top 10 record or a platinum album. And yet, Lupe wasn't enough of a threat to even be called out on that Control verse? Huh? Going back to Lupe and Kendrick having the same career trajectories in parallel universes, it's funny because so many Lupe Fiasco fans are Kendrick Lamar fans. A lot of Lupe's greatest critics are also probably his biggest fans. So when he talks about the fan reaction to that Control verse being the reason why these issues with Kendrick Lamar started in the first place, the irony is that a lot of the quote-unquote Kendrick fans who Lupe points to as being insufferably combative throughout that time period were also probably very big Lupe Fiasco fans as well. And one could theorize, we're not stating any facts here, that maybe by the time Kendrick released Control, Lupe was looking at where Kendrick was at and how he just created a massive cultural moment entirely off the strength of just his words, which was the exact kind of lyrical skill that Lupe always had, but rarely got rewarded for on that level. And then you couple on top of that the fact that Lupe wasn't even mentioned among the rappers that Kendrick called out, and all of this together might have felt like a sign of how far Lupe had actually been pushed out of the center of that conversation. Maybe when Lupe looked at Kendrick and the fans' reaction to the massive moment Kendrick just created, he didn't just see another successful rapper or a massive moment. He saw someone standing in the position that he believed his own talent, his own influence and sacrifice should have earned him, especially after years of fighting labels, industry politics, the corporate machine. On the flip side, Kendrick's ascension into the industry seemed like a smooth ride, far from the turbulent roller coaster that Lupe himself had suffered behind the scenes. But before we get into why Lupe Fiasco may have viewed Kendrick Lamar as the poster child for the career that he himself was supposed to have, we first have to understand why their paths look so similar in the first place. See, many of you guys probably know that Kendrick Lamar had a very strong mentor in his corner early in his career, and that was none other than Dr. Dre. In fact, what's crazy is we actually just came up on the 15-year anniversary of Kendrick's first, well, you can't call it major label debut album, but his first, real strong project to the world in Section 80. And Stat Quo on the Third Verse podcast, who was also under that Dr. Dre Eminem umbrella, had recently revealed Dr. Dre actually told Kendrick not to release Section 80, but instead save the best songs and just keep working towards his first studio album, which would become Good Kid, Mad City. And it was Statco's advice to Top Dog Entertainment that may have potentially led Kendrick to release Section 80 as an independent mixtape initially to avoid being another shelved artist battling the label and instead gain some organic internet buzz before he was ready to drop his debut album.
Dre was trying to stop him from putting it out. We listened to it before it dropped. And it was supposed to come out the very next day, Section 8.
Section 8.
And they sat up there and told Top, don't put it out. Dre's like, don't put it out. Let's just focus on the album. Because Dre's whole thing, we want the first thing we hear from this dude to be what we putting out as the album. We don't want to mess up what people's perception of what he could be. And I told Top, I'm like, bro, you got to have momentum here. I had learned that. And I just wanted to pass that along to him. I told him, I said, bro, look at me. If you don't put that album out, Kendrick is going to be me. I said, put it out, dog. I don't care what they tell you. You got to have your own momentum over here for them to respect what you got going on. They put that shit out, he took off. I think that Top was going to do it anyway.
Now, similarly to Kendrick, Lupe Fiasco also came up with a very strong mentor in his corner. Lupe started his career in a group called The Pack, which was signed under Epic Records, and a couple years later he struck a deal as a solo artist under Arista Records. That deal ended up falling apart after L.A. Reid left Arista Records, and around that period, while shopping for a new record label, Jay-Z had actually become a major supporter of Lupe Fiasco and was very impressed by his abilities. So much so to the point where Jay actually wanted to sign Lupe to Rockefeller Records, but Lupe ended up turning the offer down to build his own imprint, First and 15th.
You're one of few cats that actually initially turned down Jay-Z as he, threw a deal at you. They say, what the hell are you thinking? What was that like, saying no to Jay-Z?
We had the opportunity to build up our company or build up his some more. Me and my partner Chili, we decided to build up our company, you know what I'm saying? And hopefully one day we'll be a Rockefeller ourselves. And now we're closer to that than ever. And it was easy. It wasn't that hard. And he's still with the team, he's the executive producer. Everything that we got, that we could have got out of signing with Rockefeller and being with Jay, we got anyway,
Now the thing is, here is where it gets tricky, or chilly I should say. See, while Lupe turned down a Rockefeller deal in order to build his own record label First and 15th with his partner Chili, they actually brought Lupe's music and the First and 15th label over to Atlantic Records, specifically because Jay-Z had told Chili and Lupe that he was going to become the president of Atlantic and he wanted Lupe over there. Lupe and Chili end up signing with Atlantic, but the problem is Jay never ended up becoming the president of that label. Instead, he went on to become the president and CEO of Def Jam around 2005, which left Lupe stuck on Atlantic. Chili had spoken on the situation saying, "This is how it went, I'll never forget it. Jay hit me and he was like, yo, I'm coming to Atlantic Records. I'm going to be the president of Atlantic. L.A. Reid was my man. I introduced L.A. Reid to Jay-Z." Remember, L.A. Reid had left Arista, which led Lupe to leave Arista as well. Chili claims that he's the reason why Jay-Z and L.A. Reid got tight to begin with, and that's likely how Jay got acquainted with Lupe's music. So Jay-Z's like, I'm coming to Atlantic. I need you and Lupe over at Atlantic with me. I'm like, cool. I'm thinking Jay-Z's coming to Atlantic, so I do the deal. And see, here's where the, I believe, foundation of the problem lies. While Kendrick started off in the home he belonged in, being developed by the different lyricists over at Top Dog Entertainment like Ab-Soul and J-Rock, while getting some higher level game from vets like Dr. Dre, Lupe had Jay-Z in his corner, but he was now at a home that didn't necessarily prioritize lyrical rap. They were handling the Diddy and Bad Boy releases at the time, they were building Trey Songz's early career, they had Sean Paul on the label, Trina, Trick Daddy, and yeah, they had some lyrical acts on the label as well, like T.I. and Twista, but Lupe was creating from a much different space than all these artists, and the landscape of hip-hop at the time was in a much different spot than it is today. But similar to Lupe, there was another fellow Chicago native who was changing all of that, and ironically, he actually was a rock boy. See, around the time that Lupe had struck that Atlantic deal, Kanye West was in the process of widening the emotional language of mainstream rap, shifting space away from the dominance of street-centered, hypermasculine narratives and towards a more introspective, vulnerable, self-conscious kind of hip-hop star. So with him being signed to Jay and Jay mentoring Lupe, it made sense that the two Chicago natives teamed up for a collaboration, and this was actually Lupe's big break. He was a feature on one of the singles of Kanye's second album, Late Registration, called Touch the Sky.
We never really clicked up tough until maybe Touch the Sky. And that was even through my partner. I didn't even want to do Touch the Sky.
Really?
Nah, I didn't even want to do that.
Why didn't you want to do it?
Because that wasn't my piece. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I'm over here, I don't do that. And my partner was like, nah, you gotta trust me, you gotta do this. And then from there on, we kind of clicked up and, kept it moving up into this day.
Lupe continues building his buzz by dropping a couple mixtapes, and things really heat up when he drops his first single, Kick Push, in April of 2006. And allegedly, this was a record that Atlantic Records did not even want to get behind. Lupe's partner Chili ended up putting up $100,000 of his own money to promote the song due to the lack of support from Atlantic Records. The song ends up getting some traction on radio, and the label ends up making calls to slow down that momentum. Why would they do that? Well, according to Lupe, it's because Atlantic wanted full financial control only once they saw the record actually take off. But they needed to buy some time, because they were traveling to the Philippines to literally buy the rights to the original song that Kick Push had sampled. So think about that. Your own record label is stopping your momentum from a song that they originally did not believe in, all so that they can go out and buy the original rights to the song that your single had sampled, so that they can maintain full financial control. Remember, this is Lupe's first single, so you can see how the frustration with the record label wasn't something that was brewing up. It was there from the beginning.
People are like, why would you stop a successful record? Your artist has a record that's moving on radio. Why would you call to stop it? I never quite understood the logic behind this particular part here. Listen to what Lupe says.
It's popping. It's hard to get records placed at radio. It's a lot of competition. 50's right here. Lil Wayne's right here. Such and such right here. Here's the little record that could trying to make it through. Why would you do that? Why would the chairman of this public company make that decision so detailed for himself to call this little radio station in Chicago to tell him to stop playing this record before it goes national? Because at the same time that they were doing that, they were flying somebody to the Philippines to find this lady to buy the sample.
Put this in your mind, right? You've got a record that's blowing up regionally. It's blowing up in Chicago. And at this point in time, this is a new artist. So it's having success on its own. The label didn't have to put their resources into it to make it do anything. And the chairman of the company calls the little station to stop it so that he could send someone to this place in the Philippines, find the lady who made the sample so they could buy it and own it, so they could own the whole song. So they need the record to slow down until they can own it.
Now, very similarly to how when Dr. Dre and the execs over at Interscope first heard Kendrick Lamar's Section 80, they told him not to release it and instead wait for his major label debut. When Lupe played his debut album, Food and Liquor, for the executives over at Atlantic, they also weren't pleased with his debut album. In an interview with Justin Hunt, Lupe's partner Chili had said, "We played Food and Liquor for Atlantic chairman's Craig Coleman. Craig did not like one record off of Food and Liquor." I'm like, yo, this dude is crazy. And like I showed you guys earlier in this video, Lupe later revealed that the same executive, Craig Coleman, the chairman of Atlantic, in order to get Lupe's Food and Liquor album released, he forced Lupe to put the song Daydreaming on it. And Atlantic Records took all the revenue that song had generated. So you can see we're off to a rocky start here, right? Lupe signs to Atlantic thinking that Jay-Z will be a higher up at the label. That doesn't end up happening, but Jay still plays an important role in producing the project. But the label themselves did not like the album. They slowed down the momentum of Lupe's first single, buy the rights to the original song it sampled so they can maintain financial control of any success Lupe has, force him to put out another single, Daydreaming, which is one of Lupe's best songs. But because the chairman of Atlantic had produced that song, Lupe gets no royalties off it. Crazy work. Nevertheless, even though Atlantic didn't like the album, the world did. It's a unanimous hip-hop classic. It features my favorite Lupe song of all time, Hurt Me Soul. And when you listen to that song, you're like, there's no way a songwriter on this level is not making it to the top of the charts. It didn't matter how deep Lupe's message was. Similar to Kendrick, he delivered very heavy, complex messaging through an extremely catchy medium. But see, the label didn't care about how talented Lupe was. They wanted hits. And so that's exactly what Lupe delivered. With his second album, The Cool, Lupe gave us one of the biggest hits of 2007 with the song Superstar. If you are what you say you are. I was in like the 5th grade, I think, when this song took off. This was the first song I ever heard from Lupe Fiasco. And this didn't feel like everything else in hip-hop that my 5th grade brain was ingesting at the time. My favorite rapper was Lil Wayne, but Lupe didn't have that southern drawl or that alien-type cadence that Lil Wayne approached his rhymes with. He didn't have that like psychopathic horrorcore element that initially drew me to a lot of Eminem's earlier work. They were playing a lot of Ludacris and T.I. on Canadian radio stations at the time. Lupe was nothing like that. He was nothing like 50 Cent. He was very different from Kanye. Like, I remember having that whole first verse to Superstar memorized. And it was like, you felt like a superstar rapping it, right? Like trying to catch a microphone check 212. I didn't even know what he was talking about, but that's what I mean, right? Like he delivered a complex message in a very digestible way. He even actually wrote the hook to that song. And I remember this was the period where I was diving deeper independently into my own journey of hip-hop music, separate from what I'd hear on the radio and see on TV. And for a while, throughout, that 5th, 6th grade, I was kind of wondering in the back of my head, like, where was that guy that made Superstar? Where did the Superstar go? Kanye's out of here with Graduation. Lil Wayne is out of here with Young Money. But you don't hear about Lupe Fiasco as much throughout 2008, 2009. Throughout that time, he starts working on his 3rd album, Lasers. His 2nd one, by the way, Lupe Fiasco's The Cool, amazing project, and that was a huge success of its own as well. I'm sure the label was happy with its performance, so it didn't really make sense where Lupe Fiasco went. But meanwhile, the shifts that the landscape of hip-hop was faced with made it the perfect time for Lupe to really take it to that next level and become the face of the next generation. The blog era is emerging with rappers like Wale, J. Cole, Big Sean. Lil Wayne signs this Canadian teen actor who's singing about heartbreak. Spicy. Kanye West just beat 50 Cent in that sales battle. So in all this time, where's the dude who was singing about being a superstar or that it hurt his soul? Well, there may have been a reason for Lupe's absence at that time. He was faced with a lot of adversity. His father ended up passing away. Then one of his friends passed away. Then his partner, Chili, the guy he came into the game with, ends up getting sentenced to 44 years in prison. So after dealing with all these issues and taking his 2nd album out on the road, Lupe ends up finishing recording his 3rd album while on tour, and he submits it to the label. The label ends up rejecting it, saying that it didn't have enough commercial hits. Again, don't forget he's signed to Atlantic. But this is what I find so fascinating, right? Like I said, the landscape of hip-hop was vastly changing around this time period. The new superstars emerging were nothing like the generation before. And while you started having artists like, Kid Cudi, Kanye, Drake, really fusing both rapping and singing all into one to create their hits, you had a lot of other rappers who, if they weren't too keen on singing, all you had to do was take a pop or R&B singer to do the hook, have the rapper rap the verses, and this was a formula for a bona fide hit.
POV. It's 2010 and your playlist goes like this.
Let me tell you what it feels like. You got something, I'll let you. Someone drink it. I like the way you walking if you walking my way.
We saw, Eminem do this with Rihanna multiple times. Atlantic Records' own artist T.I. was doing this with Rihanna as well, and Justin Timberlake. Atlantic Records really struck gold with their artist Flo Rida when T-Pain wrote the hook for the song Low, and it ended up landing in Flo Rida's lap. And this is what I mean in terms of all this being a formula, right? Because T-Pain comes with this bona fide hit of a hook for the song Low, and Atlantic Records ends up shopping it to all these different artists. It's not like Flo Rida was in the room with T-Pain creating this song. T-Pain had the hook. It was initially supposed to go to Nelly. Nelly wasn't rocking apple bottom jeans at the time, so they gave it to Flo Rida, and the rest is history.
So Low went to Nelly first because he had the apple bottom jeans at the time. Nelly said it was corny.
All Atlantic Records needed to do, if they wanted Lupe to release an album full of hits, was just find a pop star to sing a hook that was infectious and have Lupe rap the verses. I mean, he wrote the hook to Superstar. Surely he could write another amazing hook that would go on to be a smash. Well, he kept turning in different renditions of his 3rd album. The label kept rejecting it. So eventually they go back to the tried and true formula and try to basically gift Lupe Fiasco a hit of his own. You guys remember B.O.B., the Flat Earth guy? The one who popped up in 2010 with like 2 or 3 smash hits? Yeah, all those hits were initially supposed to go to Lupe Fiasco. First, it was the song Nothing on You, where Bruno Mars is singing the hook. That was given to Lupe Fiasco by Atlantic Records chairman Craig Coleman, but it was taken away from him in a moment that led Lupe to reach rock bottom when they told him that his verses and performance on the song were quote-unquote whack. Lupe says that that song ending up going to B.O.B. and becoming a smash hit was the quote-unquote tipping point. It was less about the bruised ego, but more about the audacity of it. It was mentally destructive. I say it with a certain laissez-faire now because I'm past it, but back then, hearing that stuff, it effed me up. I was super depressed, willing to just walk away from it all completely. The label tried again with B.O.B.'s 2nd hit, Airplanes, initially giving that hook to Lupe Fiasco to lay the verses down on, and years later when he's asked why his versions never came out, Lupe said this: "The label didn't like my versions and publishing." Now, as you can see, the label is trying to almost put Lupe in a creative box, right? You had all these different rappers in the blog era who were finding their sound, but none of them, from J. Cole to Big Sean to Wale, even the less mainstream acts like a Big Crit, or the more mainstream acts at the time like a Wiz Khalifa, their sound always felt authentic. It didn't sound like someone was just gifting them hooks. So like that, Lupe was at this almost stalemate with the record label, where they weren't approving of the music he was giving them. Therefore, they wouldn't promote it. And because of that, his buzz was dying down, and without a hit, the label wouldn't release his album. Eventually, Lupe forfeits and says, if you don't like the songs I'm giving you, just give me a hit. If I have a hit, then we could release the project. But it's not just about putting out a song that could generate money. It's also about where is that money going to be funneled through, and how can Atlantic Records profit as much as possible.
The record company sent me a song and said, this is Lupe, you need a #1 smash. And this is a #1 smash. They sent me the track and the hook. And they sent me 7 of those. The last one, when I was like, I'm done fighting, I'm gonna just Martin Luther King this one. Turn the other cheek. When I recorded the verses and sent the record back to them, they called me back and said that they didn't like their own hook anymore. So if you tell me that my records are whack, then give me great records. So then you give me these records, I send these records back to you, you don't even like your own records. Where does that leave us? I was also told, because you didn't sign this 360 deal, we may or may not push your record. So when Shining Down came out, and you didn't hear it on the radio station, because they never took it to a radio station.
Now, between the constant back and forths Lupe was having with the label and the constant pushbacks of his third albums, his fans ended up drawing a petition trying to force Atlantic Records' hands into releasing the project. They said the fans have been waiting for the release of Lupe's album for over a year. It was officially announced as finished last summer, but yet we still have no release date. We demand that you stop playing around and give us the album we've been highly anticipating. They ended up getting 30,000 signatures and even protesting outside the Atlantic Records offices. And when Lupe heard his fans were going to protest, he ended up joining them.
So, thank you for the petition. First of all, 30,000 signatures.
And with that, Atlantic Records' hand was finally forced, and the first single to Lupe's album Lasers ended up releasing the next week. The Show Goes On, and this became Lupe's biggest hit of his career thus far. I really liked this record when it came out. It was all over Canadian radio. It sounded like Lupe picked up exactly where he left off with Superstar. It sounded authentic to him. It did not seem like a forced radio hit. At the time, as like an 8th grader, it still felt like a hit with a message behind it, right? But surprisingly, Lupe actually did not like that record, and even said that he had barely anything to do with the creation of it. There's really nothing to tell about that record, to be honest. I didn't have nothing to do with it. That was the label's record. It wasn't like I knew the producer or knew the writer. That was one of those records the record company gave me. They even gave me the stuff they wanted me to rap about. The president of Atlantic Records came to me and said, hey, check this out. I got this song. He played me The Show Goes On for me on an iPod. I was used to it because they presented me like 10 other songs in the same fashion or via email. So for me at that point, it was just another record like, is this a song you want me to do? There was nothing special about it. I was like, you know I still want off of your record label, right? Those were the conversations me and Atlantic Records were having. And that sucks to see, right? Lupe came in the game unique and believing in his art so much that him and Chili put up $100,000 of their own money to push his first single, Kick Push, when the record company didn't believe in it. But at this point, he was so fed up, so burnt out, that he ended up going through 10 different sessions where the label was just sending him these formulaic pop hits, and he was just laying down whatever vocals they wanted with whatever message the record label wanted on those songs, because he was just so desperate to get this album out and get himself out of his contract. But I want to emphasize, it's not like Lupe had zero creative control behind any of the singles or the songs in general off this album. When speaking about the album's second single, Words I Never Said, Lupe had even said that he was presented the hook of the song, and initially it was supposed to be, about a relationship, boyfriend-girlfriend type stuff. It's funny, he calls it like a Drake song or something, but Lupe said, nah, I'm going to talk about world affairs. I've been talking about terrorism since back on Food and Liquor. So this song is not striving to do anything different than what I've been doing since the beginning. All in all, I guess the label's tricks had worked because the album was a massive success. Again, selling 200,000 copies in the first week. One of the highest selling hip-hop albums of 2011. And he had some tough competition back then. I mean, you had Lil Wayne's The Carter 4, Jay-Z and Kanye's Watch the Throne, Drake's album Take Care. So what does Lupe do next? At the height of his commercial success, well, he goes completely anti-mainstream. His next album, Food and Liquor 2, featured some very unconventional singles, but I personally really like the first two singles off this project, Freedom Ain't Free and Be Bad.
A disclaimer, this Raymer, Lupe, is not using bitch as a lesson, but as a psychological weapon to set in your mind and really mess with your conception.
The bitch, historically in hip-hop, has been a bad thing. It has been not something to aspire to in that sense. It was a derogatory term. What a duality.
The irony is that track was about Lupe's mixed feelings towards the use of the word bitch. And now years later, one of the bigger points of contention behind Lupe's battle with all these content creators and YouTubers is the fact that he actually publicly called a woman who runs a really dope YouTube channel, Absa Effin Lutely, a bitch, which was very disappointing. But Lupe's a tough guy to understand, I guess, and he definitely wanted to make sure the label did not understand the creative direction he was going with this Food and Liquor 2 project. And this will play an important role in the story very shortly, because Lupe actually packaged the album all black. The actual CD was black, and the album cover itself was black. There was nothing on it.
The entire album is black. There's no pictures or words in the album. It was more to get like, can I get the label to do that? You know, can I make that happen? Can I say, hey, I don't want to put anything in the album and I want to make that happen? And it was like a challenge almost. And I had to go through some legal battles and some wrangling and back and forth. So it wasn't as easy as I thought to put nothing in there. This was like one of the hardest albums that I had to do with putting nothing in.
About 1 month after Lupe Fiasco releases this project, Kendrick Lamar makes history. He releases Good Kid, Mad City, his debut album, sells over 200,000 copies in the first week. My favorite album of the 2010s decade. And if you pay attention, there was no compromising or bending a knee to the label when it came to producing any of the hits off that album. Swimming Pools, Poetic Justice, Mad City, Money Trees. None of these sounded like or were label formulated hits. And because of that, their impact stretched far beyond a lot of what anyone else in hip hop had been doing at the time. But before Kendrick blew up with Good Kid, Mad City, he did a live stream and Lupe Fiasco's name was brought up. And this is what he had to say about him.
We still got Lupe. We talking about Eminem here. Eminem plays on words the best of all time. Punch, yeah, Punch. Tell me everything I'm supposed to be saying, Punch. Lupe fell off. I am still Punch says Lupe fell off. Y'all agree? They killing you, Punch. They say you crazy. Punch say Lupe Fiasco doing too many fairy tale raps. It ain't organic and realistic anymore.
So you see, this wasn't actually Kendrick talking about Lupe, but he read a chat from Punch, a higher up over at Kendrick's label TDE, and Punch had said that Lupe Fiasco was quote-unquote doing too many fairy tale raps. It's not organic and realistic anymore. As far as Kendrick goes, we know that he approaches his music with a lot of complex themes and messages, but again, delivers them in a way that can appeal to a mass audience, and that was his formula for success. He is one of the top MCs, not just because of the messages he brings in his music, but because of the vast amount of people that message has been able to reach. And before Good Kid, Mad City, Kendrick knew he would become that top MC. In a 2010 freestyle, he professed it, name-dropping all the rappers who he was aiming to beat.
I'm the best rapper alive. Chick 'em that should've retired. I'm going after Kanye. Lupe Fiasco and us. Snoop Dogg and Mr. Andre. Eminem bust.
So you notice that the irony is, before Control, the very song that Lupe cites as generating the issues between himself and Kendrick was on a separate freestyle years before, name-dropping a variety of rappers that he wanted to outdo, and Lupe Fiasco at that time had been one of them. In fact, right after Kendrick released Good Kid, Mad City, he actually brought Lupe on stage at one of his shows, citing Lupe as someone who enlightens him. Meanwhile, Lupe gets on the stage and he says that he's giving out these quote-unquote next big thing awards to different artists, and there's only one artist in the world right now who deserves it, and that's Kendrick Lamar. He did warn Kendrick, though, before leaving the stage that these young guys are going to do their things, but the OGs are always here.
And thanks
We're doing something called the Lupe Fiasco Outstanding Fan Awards, right? So we have one award, right? And that award is called the Next Big Thing Award, right? I can give this award to anybody that I want. Out of the many, there's only one guy that I am a fan of that I think deserves this award. So the Next Big Thing Award goes to my big homie Kendrick. You young new niggas is going through y'all thing, but understand OGs is still here.
Lupe would even do an interview saying that he's a huge fan of Kendrick. He doesn't necessarily need to collaborate with him, but he loves the entire movement of the new generation and he's watching what they're doing on the sidelines.
You've actually shouted out people like Kendrick and Blue.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get a chance to work with any of the younger generation on the album, or is that something that's of interest to you?
Nah, I'm just more audience. It's less me wanting to collaborate and just me just wanting to be a fan.
So I show you that to say that I don't even think this whole Lupe Kendrick thing stems from jealousy. Ironically, this is where their careers intersected the most. When Kendrick had just came in the game but reached mainstream success very quickly, and Lupe had just reached the height of his mainstream success but was fighting against the label and actively trying to make his way into independence, which could mean leaving the mainstream altogether. I say that to say when Kendrick ends up dropping Control in the next year, I don't think Lupe was looking at that like, I wish I had this guy's success. I wish, the entire internet or hip hop was talking about me the way they're talking about Kendrick. I think he was more so looking at it like, this guy kind of has it easy. He's had a smooth relationship with his record label, which has allowed him full creative control over the bodies of work he's producing, which has allowed him to drop music that I wish I could be producing. And the only reason I can't is because the label has me in these creative constraints. Because of that, Kendrick has seen tons of success, but he's doing it by spreading a very similar message to the one that I'm trying to get across, with the level of complexity that I'm rapping at. He has the internet in a frenzy with this verse he just dropped, a verse I know I can produce. But at this point, I've gone through so much turbulence with the industry that I just don't have the resources or even the energy to do so. Kendrick was revitalized. He was ready to take on the game. Lupe seemed like he was ready to step out of it, not because he fell out of love with the craft, but the business of it had hurt his soul, for lack of better terms. But nevertheless, his reaction to Control was sour from the beginning. And if you pay attention to what he said, it really does seem like Lupe is kind of talking about, the fans' reaction to the verse more so than how he feels about Kendrick as an MC. But just like how his frustration with the record labels and the business behind the music left him kind of fed up with music as a whole, his frustrations with the fans' reaction to this Kendrick verse left him frustrated with Kendrick in general. Now, I did a full breakdown on every single rapper's reaction to Kendrick's Control verse, so I'll leave a link to that video in the description of this one. I think that's one of my best videos of all time. But I want to play you guys the part of that video where I break down Lupe's entire, half a decade long reaction to this Kendrick Control verse. Because this is where the quote-unquote hating starts brewing its ugly head. So I'll let old Rapaholics take it away. The day after it dropped, he went on a Twitter rampage. He tweeted out, "Dear y'all, y'all know y'all easily impressed. The bar is so low you need a shovel to get at it. Let's address it before it gets out of hand. I really don't want to, but F it. We all rap. Some of us just rap to rap, but others of us rap. So when someone who raps about raps and rappers who rap hear the rappers rap about rap, but it's just rap, rappers be like, really? I'll put it to you like this. K-Dot is not a top-tier lyricist to me and my standards when it comes to punchlines and bars. His overall lyrics are good, his story's phenomenal, but punchline, entendre, lyrically, I don't see it. I've never been destroyed. Also, the only issue that the world thinks I have with K-Dot, and I actually do, is that I think his Control verse was whack and super overhyped to be a verse claiming you are the best rapper. It was very weird. I was told it was just bait, but still. Just because they didn't speak to you doesn't mean they didn't speak. Just because I don't rank K-Dot on par with what I consider top tier doesn't mean you don't have to either, or other folks as well. It's just my opinion. Trust, I'm much harder on myself. My final opinion on rap in public is this. A$AP Rock is the best rapper in the world right now. the definition of top tier in all categories, and you should all study him and step your stuff up, even me. This concludes my opinion on rap forever. He would then go on to rap from the perspective of other rappers offering their rebuttal to Kendrick's control verse. He starts off with Eminem saying, Eminem is a winner sinner, Eminem's skin is getting no thinner, even with this dinner of M&Ms and malt liquor, etc., etc. He continues, don't get it confused, I'm really a beast with this. Don't let this MTV XXL popularity contest gas you to think otherwise. Because if you guys didn't know, in that same year Kendrick dropped Control, he was also named the hottest MC by MTV on their list of hottest MCs of the year. He continues rapping from Kendrick Lamar's perspective, saying, what rhymes with Kendrick hologramming? Hello Grammys. With no money, all in my image, my extended player had innovators imitating my entrance. Someone asked Lupe about MF Doom. He says, the real king low key. Rappers who really rap, no. My pleasure. Sees on Twitter the night after Control, inventing these responses that these other big rappers in the game would have to Kendrick's Control verse, I'm assuming. Now, pause a little bit. As I'm editing and recording this video, I realized there's a little mistake here. So, all those tweets I just read out to you guys, those were on the day after Control dropped. But the initial tweets I read, where Lupe was talking about, everyone thinks I have this problem with the Control verse, and I do, because it was whack, it was overhyped, it was a verse claiming you're the best rapper, but it was a whack verse. Those tweets were actually from 2018, 5 years later, because a fan had tweeted out to Lupe saying that Kendrick's song Look Out for Detox destroys any Lupe Fiasco tracks. Their little back and forth, it was kind of more one-sided on Lupe's end, but it had spanned for a couple years. It didn't escalate crazy or anything, but there were little things like Lupe Fiasco having an all-black album cover for his 2012 album Food and Liquor 2, and then 5 years later, Kendrick Lamar released the single All the Stars with SZA, and the album cover for that song was also just an all-black square. Lupe had tweeted out that that's a little too close for comfort, implying Kendrick was biting him. At the time, right after the Control verse, Lupe did actually drop a response record titled SLR 2. After that whole tweeting spree, Lupe released this song just 2 days after Control came out on August 14th, 2013. He rapped, my left foot is in LA, but my right foot is in Spain. That's obviously a reference to Kendrick's hometown of LA, but he's also saying that he's international with it, right? His music is making an impact overseas, out in Spain. And remember the era we're in, right? This is just less than a year after Kendrick Lamar released Good Kid, Mad City. He hadn't really had that massive global impact just yet. Meanwhile, Lupe Fiasco was already 4 or 5 albums deep. He had worldwide hits, tours, etc. He's claiming that he's reaching Kendrick Lamar's home turf of LA, but also spanning far and wide beyond the reach that Kendrick Lamar has had at that point in time. He continues rapping. Now, we all heard what he said, but what he said means we dead, and that stuff is insane. He's so crazy. Look at that little baby. Again, Kendrick was really just one major album into his career, so all these guys, Jay Electronica, Lupe, they're trying to son Kendrick, right? Jay Elec literally calling Kendrick his son, Lupe calling him a baby. And Lupe emphasizes Kendrick is nowhere near the level he compares himself to, rapping, my guy, you're not Nas, you're not Jay, you will respect me, you will reject me, but I've done so much, no matter how far you go, you will reflect me. Okay, we're back to the new Rapaholics. Now, pay attention to what Lupe Fiasco said in a 2014 interview with Hot 97, because I think, again, this adds to my theory of where all these issues started and where Lupe's frustration really lies. Again, I can't speak for Lupe. These are just my theories.
I always been a fan of Kendrick. I'm not a nut hugger like you, but
I point out the best.
Not the best. Let's stop that.
He dropped the best album of the last decade.
Here we go. What am I tight about?
This is good. My passion for Kendrick's album.
Why would I be tight about that? Kendrick is ill. He's super ill. To me, the whole TDE team is the illest team.
But you still take exception with Kendrick being the best.
I don't lyrically. No, I don't think that. To me, MF Doom is the best.
What we could do is say of the new rappers.
So on some lyrics, which I listen to lyrics. Of the young MCs, I think lyrically, it's King Los, is Logic.
Logic over Kendrick?
Right?
Love Logic.
Yes. Huh? So King Los,
okay.
Logic, Cassidy, lyrically, stop playing with me.
With Kendrick Lamar?
Hollow the Don.
I don't know how Hollow Don's work.
That's your fault. I love Kendrick. I gave Kendrick Lamar his next big thing early. But when we talking about the best, you get like Joe Budden can't rap.
He's talking about body of work, not just lyrics. You're talking about lyrics.
He's a rapper. Rappers love to talk lyrics.
Are we disagreeing that King Los is a better rapper than Kendrick Lamar? Because you're bugging if you say anything other than that.
Are you kidding me?
Yes.
Kendrick Lamar added to the lexicon of classic hip-hop albums.
But now he's creating a bar. How many rappers who are legends have done that? It's a few people who have like albums that are like, yo. Are we gonna discount AZ? Because AZ didn't put out an album that came out in.
So you notice these are very similar conversations to what Lupe is having today in 2026, saying that, you know, there's 100 rappers that are better lyricists than Kendrick Lamar. Kendrick Lamar makes better albums than Lupe, but he's far from the best lyricist. Here Lupe is in 2014, naming a bunch of rappers who all carry one thing in common. He name drops Joe Budden, AZ, Logic, King Los, Cassidy. He's challenged on that point by saying, you know, none of these rappers have an album like Good Kid, Mad City. How could they be better than Kendrick Lamar? That's the point. This is after Lupe had nearly a decade-long battle with his label. He still wasn't off the label at the time of this interview. All the rappers he names here when he rebuttals why Kendrick Lamar is not, you know, that upper echelon of lyricists are rappers who, whether they're better or worse lyricists than Kendrick, that's up to you to decide. But one thing is factual, they never had albums reach the magnitude of success like A Good Kid, Mad City. And as much creative control as Kendrick may have had with that project, the success of it may have not have happened at the magnitudes that it did if Kendrick didn't have a strong relationship with his label at the time. And that could have caused a chain reaction to where the reaction to Kendrick's Control verse was not nearly as impactful as it was, because if Kendrick never had that major label backing, he may have never been in the front of everyone's faces, to where if he called out the entire industry on a verse like Control, it could have landed on deaf ears. Look at how 3 years before he dropped that monster freestyle where he calls out Lupe by name, saying that he wants to outdo all these great rappers like Nas, Lupe, etc. But at the time, he wasn't this massive rapper yet. So when he dropped that freestyle, it garnered little to no reaction. But he drops Control 3 years later. He's got the whole industry behind him at this point, and that song makes a massive splash. I think Lupe's whole problem with this thing, yeah, it could stem from Kendrick fans' reactions to the Control verse, but all of that really at the core is because of the relationship that Lupe had with his label versus the one that Kendrick had with his. Kendrick had the industry support from the beginning. His work most definitely deserved it, but it's because of how great that he was that Interscope, Dr. Dre, TDE, whoever, gave him the green light and the budget and the resources to become this massive superstar to the point where he could drop a Control verse and mess up the entire game. Lupe Fiasco did not have those resources behind him. All those rappers he named at the time, Logic, King Los, Cassidy, they also did not have those resources behind them to create a moment as big as Kendrick did. So as great as rappers as they were, they didn't have those cult-like fan bases behind them to where they could generate absolute nuclear internet chaos if they dropped a verse like Control. And ultimately, I think that's what Lupe was frustrated about. It was that Kendrick had the industry backing to be able to create moments like that, and Lupe did not. And it ended up becoming a situation of misdirected hate, where it was like, I hate my record label, and I'm looking at you, and we're one and the same, but you got everything that I don't have from this industry. But if I had what you had, I'd be able to do everything you're doing. And don't get me wrong, I don't think that's necessarily true, right? Like, it takes a certain level of artistry to create something like A Good Kid, Mad City or anything in Kendrick's catalog. But I think there's a reason behind why when Lupe hops on these different podcasts and the conversations are supposed to center around why he believes Kendrick Lamar is not a top 100 lyricist, or, you know, the qualities or the components, the variables of what actually makes a great lyricist, the conversation ends up spiraling into rants about all the different episodes that I didn't even name in this video that made Lupe so frustrated and disgusted with the mistreatment he faced from his record label, the reasons why he was never able to take it to that next level. I mean, take a look at some of these stories. They're really unfortunate for a rapper with the type of talent and the type of projects that someone like Lupe Fiasco was bringing to the table.
When the fans wanted to do the petition, I had nothing to do with that petition. When they sent that petition to the label looked at me like I had something to do with it. I was like, I'm not antagonistic. That's just the fans. We looked at it like, okay, cool. Then when they turned around and they did the protest, it was like, I have nothing to do with that protest, but now I'm faced with this thing. I have to choose. And I either have to choose my fans or the label, because I can't do nothing. And I chose the fans. And NYPD kicked me out of the building at Atlantic. I wasn't allowed to go back in the building. And when I tell you that it destroyed little pieces and parts of my relationship with the label, it was cooked. On top of them trying to force me to do a 360 and everything else, they feel embarrassed about what just happened. Cooked. 2014, when I couldn't get a release date for Tattoo on Youth, the homies Anonymous, shout out to my homies, when the word kind of got out that Lupe, they were playing with people's release dates, Anonymous stopped fighting North Korea and the Ku Klux Klan and sent a letter to Atlantic and said, hey, if you don't release Lupe Fiasco's album, we're going to dox the entire label. I had nothing to do with that. The label blamed me because they said I did it. When Anonymous did the threaten to hack, and they was like, we gave him a release date and dropped me from the label, one of the terms of getting off Atlantic was they reset the clock on all my masters. So normally you get your masters at 10 years. This is real talk. Yeah, I never heard this. I was saving this for the memoirs.
Now, to kind of put a bow on the whole conversation of, is Kendrick a top 100 lyricist? What does it even mean to be a lyricist? I'm not a lyricist myself. I just write these intro bars, so I don't necessarily have the authority to give a concrete answer on something like that. But I mean, the literal Merriam-Webster definition of a lyricist is someone who writes lyrics, right? And in this case, we're talking about writing lyrics to a rap song. And of course, that can be judged in multiple areas: wordplay, storytelling, delivery, emotion, originality, songwriting, impact. It's not just about the complexity, but it's about the connectivity. Spicy. So when Lupe says Kendrick makes better albums than him, but he isn't a better lyricist, it almost feels like a cop-out, because what makes Kendrick albums great are the way that the songs are written and constructed, right? That's also why Lupe stood out to me in 5th grade when I first heard Superstar, because his voice, the writing, the character behind the song felt different than anything else I was hearing on the radio. But me hearing these songs on the radio would lead me into digging on my own journey, becoming enthralled with the lyricism that Wayne embodied on mixtapes like The Drought 3. High energy, punchline heavy, constant flow switch ups. These were a lot of the same elements that I'd fall in love with Biggie's lyricism. But what drew me to their music was completely different than what drew me to someone like Tupac's lyricism. That was someone I felt like I had to sit back and actually pay attention to what he was saying rather than how he was saying it, or, you know, just casually listening and being whipped in the face with a crazy punchline or a crazy bar, right? That wasn't necessarily the aspect that Tupac excelled at lyrically. It was more his storytelling, for me at least. But again, I'm not a rapper, and speaking of Tupac and Biggie, I think Daylight, an actual rapper with real authority to give a concrete opinion on something like this, summed it up perfectly. In regards to the conversation of Tupac versus Biggie and the idea of who's better lyrically, I've noticed a lot of the comments say that Biggie is the better lyricist while Pac is the better artist, which leads me to one more question. If the overall goal and hip-hop is to be understood by the mass and make records that appeal and connect to the mass, what is the point of being an extremely technical lyricist? And I think after this 13-year-long debate stemming from that control verse, Lupe Fiasco can offer a really constructive answer to this question. But I'm sure you guys can as well. So let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you in the next one.
I study rap
Rapaholics
for a living.